What's up guys, welcome to another video. Today I will be reviewing 3 different EVs, which is hilarious because I have never driven an EV until now. The closest thing was a 2019 Acura NSX in quiet mode for about 6 seconds. So this is quite a departure from the car reviews I normally do, but with how prevalent EVs are nowadays and just how many options there are, I figured I'd better just get with the times. So today we're driving 3 different EVs in a similar price range of around $50,000 to $60,000. This one is a Polestar 2 with the performance package. It starts at around $50,000, but the owner Alex has opted for the roughly $5,000 performance upgrade, which gives this 408 combined horsepower from its dual motors. It has one motor on the front axle, one on the rear, all-wheel drive, weighs over 4,600 pounds, which is insane given just how compact this car actually is. And this is going to be the first EV I've ever driven. But the way I'm going to review these 3 EVs is the way I review any car. I'm going to push it as hard as I feel comfortable on this canyon road and talk to you guys about how they actually drive. This thing has a few different drive modes here. We have steering feel, so I'm going to keep it in the firmest setting. I'm going to leave one pedal drive on, so that's basically the maximum amount of regen. So it's going to be interesting to see how I sort of have to mentally adjust to not necessarily having to use the brake pedal for corners. Without further ado, into drive. All I hear is the sound inside my head. This is quite eerie. Let's see how 408 EV horsepower feels in a 4,600 plus pound vehicle. Instant torque. Wow. This is so strange. All I hear is the tires. That's it. Holy cow, this thing's fast. I don't know what the torque figure on this car is, but it's got to be well north of 400 foot-pounds. But that's 400 foot-pounds the moment you put your foot all the way down. There is no delay whatsoever. This car is riding on some 20-inch wheels with Continental Sport Contact 6 tires. So it is a summer tire at least, so it's got some grip, but I definitely feel that 4,600 plus pound weight of the car in the corners. It seems to have a fairly low center of gravity. It stays very well controlled in the corners, but there's just no getting around that immense amount of mass. Now the crazy thing about these Polestar 2s is that they're actually kind of catering to the car or at least driving enthusiast. This thing comes with massive Brembo brakes from the factory and Öhlins suspension, adjustable suspension. Holy crap. This is actually a really fun car to drive. I'm still getting used to the one pedal driving. Oh, but look at that. Just instant torque. I can't wipe this stupid grin off my face. This is actually hilarious. The weird part is just not hearing anything but the tires. Corner exit traction's actually really good. All-wheel drive and tons of instant torque. It just puts the power down. Steering feel, completely dead. There's not a shred of road texture coming in through the wheel. I cannot tell what the front tires are doing. So even in one pedal mode, I still do have to use the brake pedal quite a bit. But it's actually pretty intuitive. Like, I can blend the regen with the actual brake pedal pretty seamlessly. So in normal driving, obviously, I wouldn't need to use the brake pedal hardly at all because the regen force is pretty strong. But for spirited canyon driving, the only difference I'm making with my right foot is that when I come off throttle, instead of going from full throttle to completely off in a split second, I try to blend it a little more so I can make use of that regen in a non-abrupt manner. I thought this would be a much bigger learning curve, if I'm being honest. I'm actually getting the hang of this. But I gotta say, this Polestar 2, really excellent suspension. The fact that it has Öhlins from the factory, that is just fantastic. so much compliance over bumps, and I think the extra weight of the car combined with its low center of gravity gives it a level of comfort and compliance that you don't typically get in a car of this segment in gas-powered form. I can only stay on the throttle for small bursts of 2 to 3 seconds because there's just so much torque. For this kind of canyon driving, I wouldn't be surprised if this thing can outrun actual sports cars. This actually feels like a proper driver's EV. Outside of the numb steering, it feels so well sorted. Now this Polestar 2 with the performance upgrade comes with a 78 kilowatt hour battery. So slightly more capacity than either the Tesla Model Y long range or the Kia EV6 Wind. But the EPA rating for range in this Polestar 2 is only 249 miles, which is quite a bit lower than those other two cars. That being said, the owner Alex mentioned that in real world testing, these cars have been found to get closer to 288 miles on a tank. I say tank just naturally, but on a charge, I should say. So that's actually very, very usable range, but it's time to hop into the Kia EV6 and see how it compares. Very relevant test, by the way, because I am considering actually doing the unthinkable for a car enthusiast and getting an EV as a daily driver in the next year or two. All right, we're now in the Kia EV6 Wind. This car is priced similarly to the Polestar 2. In this Wind configuration, this car costs around $53,000. Eric, the owner, actually mentioned that he had to pay $3,000 markup, but still at $56K before tax, very competitive price with the Polestar 2. Now, first impression sitting in this car, I think the interior actually looks really, really nice. It's competitive with the Polestar. Couple of GT3s flying by here. Oh, and another one. Cayman M3. Another Cayman. All right. But yeah, the interior is really, really nice. I would say material quality overall is excellent. To me, the Polestar maybe feels a tad more luxurious, but the Kia gets very, very close. And the biggest difference, while the Polestar has a very cramped feel to the interior, this one is a lot more spacious, which just gives it a little bit more of an airy, comfortable, inviting feel compared to the Polestar 2. Now, the other big difference just from sitting in the car is the driving position. Whereas in the Polestar 2, you can get the seat really nice and low. I have the seat as low as it'll go in this Kia, and it just doesn't feel as sporty as the Polestar 2. Now, granted, the Polestar 2 is a lower car. It's more of a hatchback than a crossover, in my opinion, while the Kia EV6 falls squarely in that crossover category. This thing puts out about 320 combined horsepower, one motor on the front axle, one on the rear, just like the Polestar. And this has a combined battery capacity of 77.4 kilowatt hours, very, very close to the Polestar. EPA rated range, 274 miles, but Eric, the owner, mentioned that he was able to get around 300 miles on a single charge. All right, so we have the Regen Braking on level 3, which is one step below max. The drive mode in Sport, which gives me the most instant throttle response, doesn't seem to affect the steering as far as I can tell. And this car weighs 4,500 pounds, so almost 150 pounds lighter than the Polestar 2, but probably a higher center of gravity due to its increased ride height. So let's see how that affects the handling. Still got that immediate electric torque, obviously. But the way it pulls above around 40 miles an hour, I can definitely feel the Polestar just has more oomph. This makes some really cool Jetson sounds on throttle though. That actually builds in pitch as you gain speed, which is pretty cool. Brakes feel good, but not as good as that Polestar's Brembos. In the corners here, this is where the Polestar is in a different league. I'm not sure what kind of suspension this EV6 Wind uses, but the Polestar is a lot more controlled and firm without being rough. The EV6, very, very compliant, but it moves around a lot. Which, you know, is kind of to be expected given that it's a larger car despite being lighter. Let's see how it handles this hairpin on camber. So we're on some Kumho all-season tires here on a 19-inch wheel. So definitely less mechanical grip than that Polestar 2. That is evident the moment I start cornering hard. If you look at the way it handles those larger bumps mid-corner, the suspension has a tendency to oscillate. It takes a few compression and rebound strokes before it settles, whereas the Polestar, with its Olin suspension and its most likely lower center of gravity, it's just one swift down and up motion of the suspension and then it's settled. So from a driving dynamics standpoint, that is going to be the biggest difference between these two cars. Overall NVH level actually seems to be slightly lower in this EV6. Now, while we're stopped here, one thing I don't like about this car is in the sport driving mode, the throttle really does feel overly sensitive. It's really like an on and off switch, whereas in the Polestar 2, it felt a lot more linear. So I'm actually gonna back this thing off to the normal driving mode. Let's see how this feels. 320 horsepower is still no joke with all that instant torque, but Polestar 2 definitely on another level of performance. A better set of tires would go a long way in helping the EV6, but ultimately, are you really buying an EV crossover or hatchback to do canyon driving? I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe some of you EV owners out there actually do some aggressive driving in your cars. A tire squeal, man, it's hilarious. This car is certainly more lively than the Polestar 2. It moves around, it lets you know when its tires are giving up. Dynamically, it's pretty enjoyable, it's pretty fun, but the Polestar 2 really feels like it's been tuned to feel composed and well sorted at 70 to 80%. Whereas the EV6 is just more of a comfortable, practical daily driver that also happens to be pretty quick on a canyon road, but not as well sorted as that Polestar. But again, I am very impressed by the EV6 in terms of its NVH levels. It's super, super quiet. I love the design of the interior. To me, it's a lot more interesting of a cabin compared to a Tesla. And I do appreciate that it has a much more open and airy feel compared to the Polestar 2. As a daily driver, the EV6 probably makes more sense than the Polestar. Where the Polestar shines, when you start pushing it, that car actually kind of comes alive. I was giggling a lot harder when driving it. It feels like a more cohesive driver's EV. So with that being said, let's hop out of the EV6 and hop into the gold standard of EVs, which of course is going to be a Tesla. In this case, a dual motor long range Model Y. Last but not least, we are now here in a brand new Tesla Model Y dual motor long range. Quan, the owner of this car, since he just got it like last week, for this video, he activated the 48-hour trial of the acceleration boost. I couldn't really find definitive horsepower figures for this particular model. I saw some sources that said it makes a combined 351 horsepower. Other sources said 384, so I'm not sure what the true number is. It's safe to say that either way, with the acceleration boost feature, this car now makes over 400 horsepower being sent to all four wheels. First impression sitting in the car, very, very open, airy cockpit. I would say even more so compared to the EV6 because there are no screens on the dash. All you have, of course, is this giant, basically iPad, which has its pros and cons. Maybe I would get used to it if I drove this car every day, but doing simple tasks like adjusting the AC and the width of the air output from the air vents, doing that from this screen just seems a little bit convoluted to me, I'm not gonna lie. I'd rather just have physical vents that I can adjust myself. I get it, everything is part of the screen. It keeps the experience very consistent and it's easier for Tesla to manufacture, of course. But from an ergonomic standpoint, I would prefer the setup and the layout of the EV6 or the Polestar 2. Just my initial impressions. A reasonably okay driving position, but again, the Polestar 2 makes me feel like I'm sitting inside the car, whereas this, I kind of have the impression that I'm sitting on top of it. Since Quan actually bought this car last year but didn't take delivery until just a week ago, he got this before the prices shot up. So this car, as spec'd, is right around $55,000. But if you want the same model right now, it's going to run you closer to $63,000. Now, with that out of the way, let's see how it drives. Sport acceleration is now activated since we do have the acceleration boost steering mode in sport. And then we have the full regen and then the stopping mode in hold. Apples to apples with the other two EVs we have here today. Now this does feel like the biggest car of the bunch. Let's see how the acceleration feels here. The acceleration's pretty brutal with the acceleration boost activated. I would say this feels on par with the Polestar 2. The brakes might be the weakest of the bunch, maybe on par with the EV6, definitely a big step down from the Polestar. This is also wearing some Continental Pro Contact all-season tires, so not exactly the grippiest tire in the world, and we are on a 19-inch wheel. So nice fat sidewalls, it's comfortable, it's compliant, not meant for this type of driving per se. I can feel it has a low center of gravity, but there's no hiding this amount of mass. Almost 4,600 pounds is no joke. So when attacking corners like this one, yeah, she's a big girl. Steering feel completely dead, just like the other two cars. That's a common theme I'm noticing here with EVs, just an absolute lack of any sort of feedback from the steering wheel. Suspension wise, I think this actually feels a bit firmer and more controlled than the EV6, but not quite as well sorted as the Polestar 2's Öhlings. I'm never gonna get used to this amount of just instant acceleration. It's mind-bending. I can't even imagine what the performance model would feel like. Let's attack this mid-speed left-hander. It's pretty well composed, all things considered. Any other traditional gas-powered crossover that weighed 4,500 plus pounds would not handle like this. Because this is an EV and the batteries are mounted super low, it does give this car an agility that you would not expect from something weighing over 4,500 pounds. Is that a hint of oversteer there? Now this car has a 75 kilowatt hour battery, so just very slightly smaller than the battery capacity in the EV6 Wind and the Polestar 2, but it has the highest EPA rated range at over 300 miles. But I think they actually might be slightly overrating the range. In real world conditions, the range of these three cars is very similar, probably within 10% of each other. Should be able to get anywhere from 270 to 280 miles of range with conservative driving, no problem. Of course, the benefit with a Tesla is you get access to a supercharging network, which happens to be excellent in the Bay Area and California in general. But as EV infrastructure continues to grow and improve, the difference between the Tesla infrastructure and the other manufacturers will continue to shrink. But that's a topic for another day. Today, I'm just focusing on the driving dynamics, and I gotta say, between these three cars, I think the Polestar has the best driving dynamics by far on a canyon road. It feels smaller and a little bit more nimble than the other two, even though it is the heaviest. It has the best tires, the best suspension, those Öhlins dampers, tried and true. So if you're mobbing on a back road or even want to attempt a track day, I suspect the Polestar 2 will be the most capable and quickest by far in stock form. The Kia EV6 Wind fills out the other end of that EV spectrum. It's super comfortable. It feels softer than even this Model Y, and the NVH level is the lowest of the three. So as a daily driver, ignoring EV infrastructure for a moment, the EV6 would be my pick. The Tesla splits the difference nicely, but considering the MSRP of these cars now being at least $7,000 to $8,000 more, it's hard for me to recommend this car. I think if you want that immediate access to supercharging stations and all the other great tech that comes with a Tesla, it makes a lot of sense. But as a pure car, I do think you kind of get the least for your money with the Model Y. So that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed my first foray into the world of EVs. This is totally new territory for me, but I'm glad I got the opportunity to drive these three well-sorted EVs in this $50,000 to $60,000 price point and get a taste of how they actually drive on a back road. If you want to see more of these types of videos, please leave me a comment down below. Thank you guys for watching. Subscribe if you have not already, and see you in the next one.